Heart of a Champion, Chapter 14. I was anxious for Babe Ruth tryouts. I thought I could hit, but I wouldn't really know until I'd made solid contact against a real pitcher. The day of tryouts, I was incredibly nervous. While Jimmy and I played catch to warm up, I couldn't keep from peeking at the other guys around us. They seemed bigger, stronger, faster, better than me. "Don't worry," Jimmy said when the coach called us in. "None of these guys has picked up a ball all winter." I felt better once we started infield practice. I handled the grounders and pop-ups. They hit me okay. Next came situation practice. The coach would yell out something like, "Runner at third, 1 out," before hitting a grounder or a pop-up or a fly ball. A lot of guys would field the ball okay, but then not know what base to throw to. I always knew what to do when the ball came to me. The last part of the tryout was batting practice. Waiting for my turn, the whole Steve Cannon nightmare came back to me. I was afraid I'd get in the box and not be able to touch anything. But the fastballs they threw me were about what Jimmy had been throwing, maybe a little slower. I never did relax, but that's not the worst thing when you're batting. Tension keeps you sharp. I got 24 pitches and I handled them pretty well. After the last guy hit, the coach spoke. "Listen up, gentlemen. I wish you could all play, but the Little League's Adult Softball American Legion, well, there just aren't enough fields. Some of you won't make this team. I'm sorry. I really am." He paused. "I'll post the roster at the rec center office by noon tomorrow. Thanks for trying out." As we walked home, Jimmy told me I was dead certain to make the team. Don't sweat it. But I did sweat it. That night I kept waking up every hour or so. I relived every moment of the tryout, trying to find a place where I'd screwed up. But I couldn't. I didn't eat the next morning. I tried to kill time watching television, but it was still no use. So I slipped into the backyard and pounded the ball off the wall. I must have gone into a trance, because the next thing I knew, my mother was at the back door. "It's almost 12:30. I'll give you a ride over to the rec center." Neither of us spoke on the way. My mother pulled into the lot and waited while I went inside. From across the room, the words jumped at me. "Redwood City Babe Ruth Reds." I looked down the list, my heart thumping. I spotted Jimmy's name at the bottom, but I couldn't find my own. I felt a numbness come over me. It wasn't there. I looked again, and there it was at the top. Seth Barham. The first name, I'd looked right past it. On the ride home, I told my mother how lucky I was to make the team, how if they'd thrown me fastballs like Steve Cannon's, I would have been cut. When we pulled up in front of the house, she turned off the engine, then looked at me. "Seth, I don't want to hear any more about luck. The way you've practiced baseball, the hours you put into it, you've been exactly like your father was at golf. Exactly. He called it working at his game. That's what you've done. You have worked your way onto that team, so be proud of yourself." Later that night, when I was tossing my baseball into my glove, I thought about what my mother had said, and the question came to me. My mother was in the front room reading. "What is it, Seth?" she asked when she saw me in the doorway. "Nothing really. Only this afternoon you said my father had to work real hard at golf. I guess I always thought the game came easy to him and that he was a natural." She laughed, then, a sad laugh. "According to your father, he was anything but. As a matter of fact, the only thing we argued about were the hours and hours he spent on his golf game. He used to say that he had to practice because he was a lousy golfer. The best lousy golfer in the world, he said, but still a lousy golfer. That never made any sense to me. Does it make sense to you?" I thought for a moment. "Not too much," I said. My mother smiled. "Well, if you ever figure it out, tell me. I'd like to know."